At exactly 12:17 in the morning, the house was silent in the way only old houses become silent, not peaceful, not calm, just still, as if every wall was holding its breath. Charlotte sat on the floor of her childhood bedroom with her back against the bed, knees pulled close to her chest, the phone resting in her shaking hand. She had not planned to stay awake this late. She had not planned to listen to anything at all. But life has a way of changing direction when you are least prepared to face it. The recording played again. She did not know why she let it repeat. Maybe because her mind refused to believe what her ears had already heard. Maybe because some part of her still hoped she had misunderstood. But the words were clear, too clear. Calm voices speaking carefully, like people who had rehearsed this conversation many times before. Her mother's voice led the discussion, steady, controlled, almost bored. Charlotte's name was mentioned casually, like an item on a list, not with affection, not with concern, but with strategy. Each sentence landed like a quiet blow, not loud enough to scream, not sharp enough to bleed, but heavy enough to crack something deep inside her chest. She pressed her free hand against her mouth, not to hold back tears, but to stop herself from making a sound. Because once you hear something like that, once the truth enters your body, you realize how fragile silence really is. She remembered how many times she had trusted that same voice, how many nights she had cried on her mother's shoulder, believing she was safe, believing she was loved, believing that family was the one place where betrayal could never grow. That illusion collapsed slowly, painfully, as the recording continued. There was laughter, soft, private, the kind of laughter people use when they believe no one else will ever hear it. Her uncle spoke next, his tone light, almost amused. He talked about timing, about paperwork, about how things would be easier once Charlotte was out of the picture. Not gone, not hurt, just removed. Like a problem solved neatly. Her aunt added details, practical ones. She spoke about appearances, about how the family's image mattered, about how Charlotte would understand eventually, because she was always so reasonable. Charlotte closed her eyes, but the words followed. Her, anyway. They echoed through her memory, mixing with moments she had once thought were happy. Every smile now felt staged. Every kind gesture felt calculated. The room around her felt smaller, tighter, like it was slowly pressing in. She had grown up believing she was lucky. People used to say it all the time. Lucky to be raised in such a strong family. Lucky to have stability. Lucky to have guidance. She believed it because she had never known anything else. From a young age, she learned that being good meant being quiet, that being loved meant not asking too many questions, that trust was something you gave freely, especially to blood. Charlotte was never the loud one. She was never the rebel. She followed rules, met expectations, carried responsibilities that were never meant to belong to a child. She told herself that was just how families worked. That sacrifice was normal. That silence was strength. But silence, she now understood, had made her invisible. The house she sat in had always felt permanent to her, solid, unchanging. Family dinners at the same table, holidays with the same routines, the same stories told again and again. She thought those repetitions meant security. What she did not realize was that routines can also hide secrets very well. Looking back, the signs had always been there. Conversations that stopped when she entered the room. Decisions made without her knowledge. Documents she was told not to worry about. Money that was being handled. Futures that were already planned. She had trusted all of it, because why wouldn't she? They were family. Charlotte opened her eyes and stared at the dark ceiling. Her heart felt heavy, but her mind was strangely clear. The shock was still there, yes, but beneath it was something else, something sharper, something that had been forming quietly for years without her noticing. Awareness. She realized then that this recording was not an accident. It was a crack in a wall that had been carefully built around her life. And once a crack appears, no matter how small, the truth always finds a way through. She did not cry that night, not yet. Tears felt too small for what she had just lost. Instead, she listened again and again. She memorized their voices, their pauses, the certainty in their plans. She paid attention to every detail because deep down, she knew this moment mattered. Not because it hurt, but because it changed her. When the recording finally ended, the silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was full of understanding. Charlotte placed the phone face down on the floor and took a slow breath. Her hands were steady now, her heartbeat calmer. Something inside her had shifted. She had spent her whole life being shaped by their expectations, quietly adjusting, quietly accepting, quietly disappearing when it was convenient for them. That version of her did not survive midnight. What survived was someone who finally saw the truth. And once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. Charlotte stood up slowly and looked around the room. Her room, posters she never chose, furniture bought without her opinion, a life designed to keep her small. She realized that everything she thought was given to her had actually been used to control her. They thought she would never find out. They thought she would never listen. They thought silence meant weakness. They were wrong, because silence had taught her patience. And patience, she was beginning to understand, was power. She did not confront anyone the next morning. She did not ask questions. She did not reveal what she knew. Instead, she smiled at breakfast. She listened, she observed, she watched how easily they played their roles, unaware that the balance had already shifted. Charlotte had always been underestimated, seen as harmless, predictable, easy to manage. And that, she realized, was exactly why she would win. The next few days passed like a carefully rehearsed performance. Charlotte moved through the house as she always had, calm and polite, answering questions with short replies, smiling when expected. No one noticed anything different, and that alone confirmed what she had already learned from the recording. They did not see her as someone capable of noticing change. To them, she was background, familiar, safe to ignore. But Charlotte noticed everything. She noticed how her mother avoided meeting her eyes when financial topics came up. She noticed how her uncle suddenly became more present, asking questions about her plans, her work, her future, all with a tone that felt rehearsed. She noticed how her aunt's kindness now came with reminders, gentle ones, about gratitude and loyalty, and how much family had done for her. Each word sounded harmless on the surface. Underneath, they were measuring her, testing how much control they still had. At night, when the house finally slept, Charlotte replayed the recording in her mind. She did not need to listen to it again. Every word was already burned into her memory. She focused on details she had ignored before. Dates mentioned casually, numbers referenced without explanation, a name she did not recognize at first, but later connected to a lawyer her uncle often spoke about with respect. It became clear that the conversation she had heard was not new. It was part of something larger, something that had been unfolding quietly while she lived her life believing she was included. Charlotte began to ask questions, but never directly. She asked about old documents, about family history, about decisions made years ago that had shaped her path without her consent. She framed everything as curiosity, as innocence, and they answered her, confident in their ability to manage her understanding. They did not realize that each answer gave her more clarity. One afternoon, she found herself alone in the study, a room she had rarely entered as a child. It was always described as private, important, off-limits. Now, standing there as an adult, she understood why. The shelves were lined with folders and files, all carefully labeled, all organized in a way that suggested long-term planning. She did not rush. She did not panic. She took her time, opening only what she felt confident she could close without leaving a trace. Financial records, property documents, trust agreements, names appeared again and again. Her family's names, and hers. Charlotte single quotes s, but always positioned differently. Her name appeared as a beneficiary, but with conditions, restrictions, clauses that placed control firmly in someone else's hands. She realized then that her independence had never been accidental. It had been delayed on purpose. The weight of that understanding settled slowly. They had not just planned to remove her. They had designed her entire life to make that removal easy. When she returned the files to their place, her hands were calm, her breathing steady. The fear she expected never came. Instead, there was focus, because fear clouds judgment, and Charlotte needed her mind clear. She began keeping notes, not written ones, mental ones. Who said what? When they said it, how their tone changed depending on who was present. She noticed how conversations shifted when money was involved, how her name caused subtle tension, how decisions were announced rather than discussed. Bafutsi saw patterns where she had once seen coincidence. At dinner one evening, her uncle casually mentioned that the family was considering simplifying things. He spoke lightly, as if discussing furniture or travel plans. Charlotte nodded and asked what he meant. He smiled and said it was nothing she needed to worry about, that they would take care of everything. She smiled back. Inside, something hardened, because she finally understood what everything meant. Charlotte had always believed that love was loud, that if someone cared, they would show it openly. But the older she got, the more she realized that real power moved quietly. The plans that mattered were never announced. They were whispered behind closed doors, shared only among those who believed they deserved control. That night, Charlotte lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying not the recording, but her life. Moments that once felt confusing now made sense. Opportunities discouraged, paths redirected, choices framed as mistakes before she even made them. She had been guided away from independence with such care that she never noticed the hands steering her. Until now. The realization was painful, but it also brought clarity, and clarity brought resolve. Charlotte did not want revenge fueled by anger. Anger fades, it makes mistakes. She wanted something stronger, something lasting. She wanted truth, she wanted balance. She wanted to take back what had been quietly taken from her for years, and she knew she could not do that by confronting them directly. Not yet. People who believe they are in control reveal the most when they think no one is watching. So she watched, she listened, she waited. Days turned into weeks. The family continued as usual, confident in their narrative, confident that Charlotte remained unaware. They spoke freely around her, careful but not careful enough. Each slip added another piece to the picture she was assembling in her mind. One evening, her mother mentioned a meeting scheduled for the following month. A routine matter, she said. Papers to be finalized. Charlotte asked where it would be held. Her mother hesitated, just for a second, before answering. That hesitation told Charlotte everything she needed to know. This was the moment they had been working toward, the point where plans became permanent. Charlotte went to her room that night and closed the door softly behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel the weight of what was coming. Not fear, not sadness, responsibility. Because knowledge carries responsibility. She had a choice now. She could remain silent and let them decide her future, or she could act carefully, deliberately, on her own terms. Charlotte chose herself. She did not sleep much that night. Instead, she planned, not details, not outcomes, just direction. She would protect herself first. She would gather proof. She would make sure that when the truth came out, it could not be denied or twisted, because lies survive only in shadows, and Charlotte was done living in the dark. Charlotte understood now that every move mattered, not just what she did, but when she did it, how she did it, and who saw it. The version of her that once acted without thinking had disappeared. In its place was someone quieter, sharper, more aware of the space she occupied and the silence she carried with her. She started with distance, emotional distance. She stopped sharing personal details, stopped asking for advice, stopped seeking approval. It was subtle enough that no one commented on it, but the shift changed how people interacted with her. When you stop offering yourself freely, people begin to show their intentions more clearly. Her uncle began checking in more often. Casual calls, short messages, questions that sounded supportive but felt investigative. He wanted to know where she was spending her time, who she was talking to, what she was planning. Charlotte answered just enough to appear open, while giving away nothing of value. Her mother, on the other hand, became quieter, more controlled. She watched Charlotte closely, as if trying to sense a change she could not define. There were moments when their eyes met across the room, and Charlotte wondered if her mother suspected something. But suspicion without proof meant nothing. Charlotte made sure there was no proof. She spent more time outside the house, working late, visiting the library, sitting in quiet cafes where no one knew her name. In those spaces, she thought clearly. She replayed conversations. She built time. She remembered dates, events, and decisions that had once felt disconnected. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The recording was not just a plan, it was confirmation. Confirmation that her future had been discussed, negotiated, and altered without her knowledge. Confirmation that loyalty in her family flowed upward, toward power, not outward toward care. Charlotte knew she could not challenge that power without understanding it fully. One afternoon, while sorting through old emails on her laptop, she came across messages she had ignored years earlier. Invitations she never accepted, opportunities she dismissed because they seemed inconvenient at the time. Looking at them now, she realized how often she had been guided away from growth with gentle discouragement. She remembered being told she was not ready yet, that it was better to stay close to family, that big changes could wait. Waiting had cost her years, but waiting had also taught her patience. Charlotte began reaching out quietly. Old acquaintances, former classmates, a colleague who worked in finance. She did not explain everything. She did not accuse anyone. She simply asked questions, general ones, about processes, about rights, about how decisions were usually made when families managed shared assets. The answers she received confirmed her fears. What was happening in her family was not care. It was control disguised as protection. Charlotte felt anger then. Real anger. Not explosive, but deep. The kind that settles into your bones and stays there, reminding you of what was taken. But she did not let it guide her actions. She let it sharpen her focus instead. She knew that if she moved too quickly, they would close ranks. They would deny everything. Rewrite the story. Make her doubt herself. People who live comfortably with lies are skilled at turning truth into confusion. So she prepared for that. She documented everything she could, carefully, quietly, not physically, digitally, securely, copies of records she was entitled to see, screenshots of emails, notes of conversations, recorded in her memory first, then written down later when she was alone. Every piece mattered. As weeks passed, the pressure increased. Her aunt mentioned how stressful things were becoming, how important it was for the family to stay united. Her uncle spoke about loyalty, about how some people misunderstand intentions. Her mother reminded Charlotte of everything the family had done for her. Each comment felt like a test. Looking back, Charlotte realized something else. None of them asked her what she wanted. Not once. They spoke about her future as if it already belonged to them. That realization hurt more than the recording. One evening, Charlotte overheard her name mentioned through a half-closed door. She did not mean to listen. She had been walking past, heading to the kitchen, but when she heard her uncle's voice drop, she stopped. They were discussing timelines, not in detail, just enough for her to understand that something was approaching faster than she had expected. The meeting her mother had mentioned was closer now. Decisions were being finalized. Control was being secured. Charlotte stepped away quietly, her heart steady, her mind racing. She knew then that waiting any longer would cost her the chance to act. That night, she made a decision. She would not expose them out of rage. She would not confront them emotionally. She would let the truth speak for itself, in a way they could not silence or dismiss, because truth, when presented calmly and clearly, is terrifying to those who depend on lies. Charlotte prepared her next steps carefully. She organized what she knew. She verified what she suspected. She imagined every possible reaction they might have, every defense they might raise, and she planned around all of it. There was a moment, just before she closed her laptop, when doubt crept in. A small voice asked if she was doing the right thing, if family deserved one last chance, if confronting them privately might be kinder, but kindness had been used against her for too long. Charlotte turned off the light and lay in the darkness, listening to the quiet hum of the house. The same house that had once felt safe, the same walls that had hidden so many conversations without her. She felt strangely calm, because she was no longer reacting. She was choosing, and once you choose to step out of someone else's control, there is no going back. Charlotte knew that the hardest part was not uncovering the truth. It was living with it while pretending nothing had changed. Every smile she returned felt heavier. Every shared meal felt like a performance staged for an audience that believed the ending was already written. She began to see her family differently now, not as villains, not as monsters, but as people who had chosen comfort over honesty, control over care. And once she understood that, the fear she once felt around them disappeared. Fear only exists when you believe someone has power over you. Charlotte no longer believed that. She chose a moment carefully, not dramatic, not confrontational, a moment where they would least expect resistance. It came during a family gathering that looked ordinary from the outside. Warm lights, laughter, plates passed around the table, conversations overlapping. Charlotte watched them closely as they spoke, noting how relaxed they were, how confident. People are always most careless when they feel secure. Her uncle brought up the meeting again, casually, as if it were a minor detail. He spoke about paperwork, about final steps, about how things would soon be settled. Charlotte listened, nodding slowly, then asked a simple question. What exactly is being settled? The table went quiet. Not completely, just enough. Enough for Charlotte to notice how quickly her mother reached for her glass, how her aunt adjusted her posture, how her uncle smiled a fraction too late. Her uncle answered smoothly, saying it was nothing to worry about, just family matters. Charlotte smiled gently and said she understood. She did not press further. She did not challenge him, but she had seen the shift. That night, she knew they were aware now, at least partially, not of the recording, not of the evidence, but of her awareness, of her presence, of the possibility that she was no longer blind. The following days confirmed it. Conversations became more guarded, doors closed more often. Her mother asked questions that felt careful, indirect, as if trying to measure Charlotte's knowledge without revealing anything. Charlotte remained calm. She answered honestly where it did not hurt her, and vaguely where it did. She let them believe they still had time. In reality, she had already taken her first real step. She met with someone outside the family, not a dramatic meeting, not an accusation-filled one, just a quiet conversation with someone who understood systems, processes, and rights. Charlotte laid out the situation carefully, without emotion, without exaggeration. For the first time, someone listened without trying to soften the truth. What she learned confirmed what she had already suspected. The plans her family had made were designed to limit her autonomy permanently. They were legal, carefully constructed, and deeply unfair, but they were not unbreakable. Charlotte felt something close to relief, not because the situation was easy, but because it was clear. Clarity removes fear. It replaces it with direction. She returned home that evening feeling different, lighter, more grounded. She had crossed an invisible line, the one between being managed and managing herself. Her family sensed it. They began to rush. Her aunt suggested changes that needed quick agreement. Her uncle emphasized urgency. Her mother spoke about trust, about how family must move together, not separately. Charlotte listened, then she asked for time, just time. The request unsettled them more than any accusation could have. Time meant delay. Delay meant uncertainty, and uncertainty threatened their control. That night, Charlotte sat alone in her room and listened to the recording one last time, not to relive the pain, but to remind herself why she was doing this. She did not hate them. She did not want to destroy them. She wanted the truth acknowledged and her future returned to her own hands. She made copies, secure ones. She ensured that if anything happened to her access, the information would not disappear. The next morning, she told her family she needed space, not permanently, just enough to think clearly. The reaction was immediate. Concern turned into pressure. Pressure turned into frustration. They asked why. They asked who had influenced her. They asked what she was hiding. Charlotte answered calmly, "I'm thinking for myself." Those 4 words changed everything. The meeting they had planned was postponed, not cancelled. Postponed. They needed time now. Time they no longer fully controlled. Charlotte used that time wisely. She organized her affairs. She prepared emotionally for confrontation. She accepted that the version of family she once believed in no longer existed. And in its place, something stronger was forming. Not revenge driven by anger, not justice fueled by bitterness. But self-respect. Charlotte understood. Now that betrayal does not always come with shouting or cruelty. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in concern, justified as protection, and that kind of betrayal is the hardest to face, but it is also the most important to confront, because if you do not, you lose yourself slowly, without realizing it. Charlotte was done losing. Charlotte could feel the tension tightening around the house like a cord pulled too far. Every conversation now carried weight. Every silence felt deliberate. Her family was no longer pretending quite as easily, and that told her she was closer to the center of the truth than they were comfortable with. They stopped asking gentle questions. They started making statements. Her uncle spoke about responsibility, about how difficult it was to manage everything alone. He reminded her of sacrifices made, of choices adjusted for her benefit. Her aunt spoke about unity, about how families that argue lose everything. Her mother spoke last, always last, with a calm voice that carried authority. She told Charlotte that uncertainty created problems, that hesitation caused damage, that trust meant moving forward together. Charlotte listened. She did not interrupt. She did not argue. When her mother finished, Charlotte nodded and said she understood. And for the first time, that was true. She understood exactly how they saw her. Not as a daughter, not as an equal, but as a variable that needed to be managed. Charlotte chose the moment carefully, not in anger, not in front of outsiders, not when emotions were already high. She waited until the house was quiet again, until routine lulled them into confidence. One evening, after dinner, she asked if they could talk, just for a few minutes. They agreed quickly, too quickly, as if they believed this was finally the moment she would fall back into place. They sat in the living room, the same room where family photos lined the walls, smiling faces, celebrations, memories that now felt distant, almost staged. Charlotte stood instead of sitting, not intentionally. It just felt right. She spoke calmly, slowly. She told them she knew about the plans. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply stated facts, dates, decisions, documents, conversations. At first, they denied it, softly, politely. They said she misunderstood, that she was confused, that things were more complex than she realized. Charlotte let them finish. Then she mentioned the recording. The room changed. Not dramatically, not explosively, just enough. Her uncle's face tightened. Her aunt looked away. Her mother's expression remained composed, but something in her eyes shifted. Calculation replaced confidence. Charlotte did not play the recording. She did not need to. She told them she had copies, that she had documentation, that she had spoken to people who understood the situation clearly, that she knew her rights. For the first time, they listened. Her uncle tried reason. He said they were only trying to protect her, that she was too close to see the bigger picture. Her aunt spoke about intention, about how no one meant harm. Her mother said nothing for a long moment. Then, she spoke. She admitted parts of it, not all. She reframed decisions as necessary. She explained control as care. She said Charlotte would have been taken care of. Charlotte felt the weight of those words. Taken care of. As if her life were something fragile, incapable of standing on its own. Charlotte replied quietly that care without consent was control, that love without honesty was manipulation, that family should not require silence to survive. There was no shouting, no dramatic collapse, just a slow, heavy realization settling over the room. They had lost control, not because Charlotte threatened them, but because she no longer needed their permission. The discussion ended without resolution, not because nothing was decided, but because everything had changed. They could no longer move forward without her involvement. They could no longer pretend she was unaware. In the days that followed, the house felt different, quieter, smaller. The authority that once filled every room had weakened. Conversations became cautious. Plans were delayed. Certainty dissolved into uncertainty. Charlotte moved forward with her own arrangements. She separated herself legally, financially, emotionally. Each step was difficult, but each one strengthened her sense of self. There were moments of sadness, moments when she mourned not what she lost, but what she never truly had, the family she believed in, the safety she assumed existed. But grief did not stop her. It clarified her path. Charlotte eventually left the house, not in anger, not in secrecy, just calmly, with her belongings and her future intact. There were no dramatic goodbyes, just distance. And distance, she learned, is sometimes the most honest boundary. She did not expose them publicly. She did not seek revenge in the way people expect. Her justice was quieter, stronger. She reclaimed her autonomy. She ensured her voice could never be removed again. And that was enough. Charlotte did not return to the house after that, not because she was afraid, and not because she was running away, but because returning would have meant pretending that nothing had changed, and everything had changed in ways that could never be undone. The first weeks on her own felt unfamiliar. The silence was still there, but it no longer pressed against her chest. It did not demand obedience or restraint. It simply existed, open and honest. She woke up without tension in her shoulders. She made decisions without rehearsing explanations in her head. For the first time in her life, her thoughts belonged fully to her. And that freedom felt strange before it felt comforting. There were nights when memories returned without warning. Small moments from the past surfaced suddenly. A laugh at the dinner table, a holiday photo, a sentence once spoken with kindness that now sounded hollow. In those moments, Charlotte felt a quiet sadness, not because she missed the people they truly were, but because she finally understood who they had never been. She questioned herself sometimes, wondered if she could have handled things differently, if there was a softer way, if walking away had been too final. Those thoughts came late at night, when the world was quiet and the mind looks for reasons to doubt itself. But every time uncertainty crept in, Charlotte reminded herself of one truth that never changed. She had not destroyed the family. The lie had existed long before she discovered it. She had simply refused to live inside it any longer. Her family reached out occasionally, short messages, neutral words, updates that avoided responsibility. There were no apologies, no real acknowledgement of what had been done, just careful attempts to stay connected without admitting fault. Charlotte read those messages calmly. Sometimes she replied, sometimes she didn't. And for the first time, she did not feel guilty either way. She no longer needed their approval. She no longer needed closure from people who were unwilling to be honest. As time passed, Charlotte began to understand something deeper about betrayal. It does not always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of change, fear of watching someone grow beyond the role they were assigned. Understanding that did not excuse what had happened. It released Charlotte from carrying anger that was never meant to be hers. She rebuilt her life slowly and deliberately, not in a dramatic rush, and not to prove anything to anyone. She chose paths she had once been discouraged from taking. She accepted opportunities she had been told to delay. She trusted her instincts instead of questioning them. With each step forward, her confidence grew, not loudly, but steadily. She learned to value her voice, to protect her boundaries, to recognize when kindness was genuine and when it was being used as control. She learned that love should never require silence, and family should never demand that you disappear to keep the peace. Charlotte never listened to the recording again. She did not need to. It had already done what it was meant to do. It was not a weapon. It was a mirror. It showed her who they truly were, and more importantly, it showed her who she had the strength to become. Years later, when she thought about that night at 12:17 in the morning, she no longer felt pain. She felt clarity, gratitude, even because without that moment, she might still be living a life chosen for her by others, a life shaped quietly by hands she trusted too much. Some truths arrive late, but when they arrive, they offer a choice. Stay comfortable inside a lie, or walk forward alone. Carrying the truth, Charlotte chose the truth, and because of that choice, she did not just survive betrayal, she reclaimed herself. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that silence is not weakness and that truth always matters, then take a moment to support the channel. Like the video, subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.